Hey guys, welcome back here to Intuitive Angling, and appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and spending some of your day with me. And today I want to give a commentary and have a little discussion on how we are losing the greatest generation of bass anglers the sport has ever seen. Day by day, we're losing a few guys here and there. You know, they're starting to age out a little bit, and I want to have a talk about this because this is a big milestone for our sport, and it's obviously it's not good, and I just sort of want to get into that today, give you guys my opinion on this, talk a little bit about where the sport has been, where it's at now, where it's going to. So we're going to get into that and really look forward to your guys' feedback and comments as well there. Also, guys, before we get started, I just want to extend a big thank you to everybody that's taken time to hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling. Really appreciate that, along with everybody that's joined as an Intuitive Angling channel member or Patreon member. Big thank you from me and my family. And just a quick reminder, guys, that I've been talking about it. Tackle Warehouse has started their annual spring fishing sale right now. They got 25% off on a bunch of stuff on the site. So if you guys are wanting to get stocked up for spring, I'll have my Tackle Warehouse link in the description of this video. That's a great way to support Intuitive Angling. If you use my link to buy your tackle, the channel gets a small percentage of a commission on anything you buy, so we really appreciate that. Me and my family do. Okay, a lot of you guys may or may not have been aware of it, but you know, Bassmaster Classic Forest Wood Cup champion Dion Hibden passed away a few weeks ago at a young age. I think Dion was 58 years old, and he was, you know, he followed his dad Guido, who passed away 4 or 5 years ago, one of the greatest anglers of all time. And in addition to Guido and Dion, you know, that were fixtures in the sport, you know, we have lost a bunch of other people. And a lot of the anglers that I'm talking about, when I talk about the greatest generation, they're in their 70s and 80s right now, and a lot of them are going to be gone in 5 or 10 years. In fact, probably more of them than not. And I wanted to speak to that a little bit and really talk about this generation of anglers and why it is the greatest generation of anglers that we just have not been able to replace. Now, you hear a lot of people talk about the World War II veterans being the greatest generation. That's sort of a phrase people have coined, and there's a reason for that. It's like, if you've ever been around some World War II veterans, and I'm not talking about just across the board, you know, because there's always exceptions, but the World War II generation, they were just built differently in a good way. Lot of different, we could go, I don't want to get into World War II in this particular video here, but you know what I'm talking about. If you guys have ever been around that era of people, the World War II and shortly after, you know, it's just, they were just built a little bit different. I mean, it's just like they were good people. They carried the weight of the entire world on their shoulders and came through. I mean, it's just the whole other conversation to have, and it's sort of like what we've seen with the greatest generation of bass anglers now that are starting to die out and age out. Now, what we're talking about here is these are the anglers that really came into greatness in the 70s and 80s. That's when they really started to, you know, build a name for themselves and develop personalities. Talking to guys like, you know, Roland Martin and Jimmy Houston and Bill Dance and Clunn and Denny Brower and Larry Nixon, and, you know, all that generation right now, that all of them are starting to get, you know, they're passing away, or they're all 80 years old or older at this point. And, you know, probably not going to be here much longer. And this is sort of surreal, because back when I started my career back in the mid 80s, these guys were at the top of their games. And to see them now that, you know, they're 80-year-old men now, it's sort of a surreal experience seeing that. Now, one of the things that is very hard for a lot of people to understand if you weren't there is the appreciation for the history of the sport that these guys brought into it. When you talk about some of the superstars in the sport that are aging out right now, one of the things that we have lost, you know, in modern day era of bass angling is the personalities. Because a lot of these anglers that we're talking about, in addition to them being incredible bass anglers, they had very unique, strong personalities. And that's what really made people gravitate towards them and had a fan base. And another thing with that, this generation that I'm talking about, the guys that are in their 70s and 80s right now, late 60s, some of them, you know, I sort of came on the scene in the, you know, few years after that. But a lot of these guys, they were sort of like the last generation of anglers that were really at the top of their game in the sport before the sport, started to fall apart. And what I'm talking about when the sport started falling apart is the single biggest thing that there are some positives to it. Don't get me wrong. I could list some positive to this, but in the bigger picture, probably the single worst thing that ever happened to this sport was the formation of the FLW Tour, the Walmart FLW Tour in 1997. This is when you started losing the personalities about when the FLW Tour came on, because what happened is prior to 1997, the only circuit that there was the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. That was it. Bassmaster Tournament Trail, they had the top 100s back then, they had the Bassmaster Invitationals, and that was that was the only definition, that was the pure only definition of what professional fishing was. You had the Bassmaster Classic, you had the Bassmaster Tournament Trail, and that was it. 35 guys that went to the Classic. You had an opportunity with those 35 guys to have a following, like a fan base, and and really market those personalities. Now you fast forward to 2026, and ever since, this has been continuing ever since 1997 when FLW started, is the explosion of new tournament circuits that came about after 1997 and continued to grow. You had everybody and his brother trying to become a tournament circuit. You had regional circuits. You had different type of national circuits. You had tons of, of the local / regional events all over the country. Then another big thing that created this was when the college and high school programs started. That put a huge influx of anglers in the whole system, and as a result, the very thing that people had been working at for a long time, which was to grow the sport, in actuality, it has hurt the sport a lot since then. Like anything else, when you have uncontrolled growth in anything, it's going to harm whatever it is. I don't care what it is, development or anything. And that's what we've seen in the sport. We've seen this influx of countless tournament circuits, countless tournament anglers on every single different level. And as a result, as this got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it even continues today, there is no clear-cut definition of what a professional angler is. There's not. Nobody can say anymore that the Bassmaster Elite Series is the top circuit, because you had, MLF sniped all the Bassmaster top 100, top 150 or Elite Series pros, when they had their split. That segmented it. Then you got the NPFL. You got tons of different regional circuits now. You got the college and high school are massive. So as a result, everybody has gotten watered down, and there's no way that you can develop personalities and superstar followings like that you had back then. I mean, back then, everybody knew who Larry Nixon was. Everybody knew who David Fritz was. Everybody knew who Clunn was. Everybody knew who Gary Klein was. Everybody knew Bill Dance, Roland Martin, Jimmy Houston. These were stars in the sport. We are never going to see that again as long as we have this oversaturation of tournaments. It's not going to happen. And that is why I call this the greatest generation in fishing, because these guys, everybody that's fishing today is riding on the shoulders of these dudes, and they don't get the credit they deserve. And a lot of them don't even know who they are. I mean, there's a bunch of people that are under 30 years old that fish today that I could name to them the top 25 anglers in the history of bass, prior to 2005, and they wouldn't even know who I'm talking about, which is sad. So as a result, this has undermined the very reputation and everything that pro fishing is. And that's why you see payouts today suck. Payouts today in 2026 are worse than they've ever been, relative to entry fees. That's why in 2026, it's more difficult to get sponsors as a tournament angler than it's ever been, ever. All of this type of stuff, this unchecked, uncontrolled growth that we've seen in the sport has effectively undermined, everything that was great about the sport back when it was at the top during the 80s and, prior to FLW. I had a chance to be in the sport when it was at the top of the game. And, from about 1985, when I started, to 1995, back when you had the Bassmasters TV show on TNN, Bob Cobb, the Bassmasters. There's nothing better than that. It's everything else has went down the tubes since that time, and I don't know what it's going to take to get it back. I mean, I don't know if it'll ever get back, because everybody says, competition is a good thing. Well, it's not in the sport of bass fishing, because just imagine if you had the same level of competition in Major League Baseball or the NLF, where a bunch of guys got together and say, okay, we're going to have a different NFL. We're going to have the whatever professional fishing circuit. Instead of having the New York Yankees in Major League Baseball, we're going to come up with some other different circuit, and we're going to snipe half the guys off of the Major League rosters and start up a new circuit. It would undermine the sport, and it would undermine, the stars and the legends of the sport. It wouldn't be the same, and that's what we've seen in professional fishing right now. That is because there has never been a governing agency that has oversaw professional angling. And the problem you have with that is that as long as professional bass fishing is a business where it's not a nonprofit organization owned by the anglers, it's never going to amount to anything. And I don't mean to be a downer on this, but I'm a realist on it. We are at a low point in the sport. It's low. I've been doing this, guys, full time. I paid my bills fishing in the fishing industry since 1985, which has been a long time. And I can assure you, and I can tell you from somebody that's been there through all this, in 2026, we are at an all-time low point in the sport of professional fishing in terms of, how electronic technology has run the sport. It's created this unlevel playing field. It's taken away all the tradition and heritage of the sport. Payouts relative to entry fees are lower than ever been before. Fishing pressure is an all-time high. It's more difficult for pros to make a living than they've ever been. It's at an all-time low right now. And that is a result of some very poor management on the upper levels, and people not doing the right thing over the long period. We've had some good people in the sport. I mean, we've had some really good people that have been visionaries in the sport, but whatever reason, they haven't endured in it. So I don't know, guys. I wish I could just sort of take over and be in control of the sport of pro fishing and make the changes necessary. Best thing that we could ever have, guys, is the elimination of every, quote, tour level circuit, and get back just to the Bassmaster Tournament Trail like it was in 1985. If we could ever get back to that point, then you would start seeing anglers being able to make a good living. You'd start seeing, sport, being elevated in the eyes of the public. You'd see superstars emerge again, but we're not anymore. I mean, pro anglers are a dime a dozen, and they come and go right and left, and nobody knows who they are. I mean, just like I said, I don't know the majority of these new pros that are out there, and that's never happened before. I mean, I could tell you everything about every pro prior to 2000 that there was. I can't do that anymore because they're constantly coming and going. There's so many of them up there, you can't keep up with them. And that's why we will never have a greatest generation that we are losing right now again. I mean, like I said, 5 or 10 years from now, guys, they'll all be gone. Every one of them will be gone, and what are we going to have at that point? So anyway, guys, let me know what you think about it. Appreciate you tuning in. We'll talk later.